everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Hunter from Outtenastrophotography. Join me as we're going on another astronomical journey as we're peeking into the cosmos as we go after one of my fan favorites coming out of the constellation of Auriga, known as the Flaming Star Nebula. Well, it's now in the winter months of the Northern Hemisphere, and it is getting quite cold out during these nights now, which actually makes it for some great astrophotography because these are the times of years where you can get a lot of low read noise because you can really start cooling your cameras down quite a bit. I run at about -20 for this time of year, but also we have a lot of long nights ahead of us, and it's kind of hard to start doing some videos, especially with the crazy work schedule I have as a broadcast meteorologist. And by the time I get home, well, it is dark out completely, so it's kind of hard to film videos. Even though I've already completed all the data that I needed for this, I got about 18 hours of hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3, and even did a little bit of some RGB to capture some of the reflection nebula that is inside of this target. So we're just going to be going through a rundown of the equipment I used for this project here, and then we're going to jump straight into the processing right on PixInsight. So for the project for the Flaming Star, I used my Explorer Scientific 102mm triplet refractor, which is reduced down to about 571mm, about a f5.6. Tracking everything using the ZWO AM5 strainwave gear mount on top of my homemade pier. The camera of choice, of course, the only one that I do have and use is the ZWO ASI 2600 MC Pro, which is a one-shot color camera. Inside of the filter wheel here, I use two filters, the RGB filter, which is the Optolong L Quad Enhance, and for the narrowband, the Optolong L Ultimate, which is a 3nm bandpass filter for hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3. Of course, being controlled everything is the ZWO ASI Air Plus. Guiding using the ZWO ASI 678 mono camera with the SV Bonnie 60mm guide scope, all packaged together for a wonderful 18 hours on this target. Then we have approached the full moon aspect now, which is tomorrow, and plus the weather here in the next couple of about a week or so, it's nothing but rain and clouds. So let's go ahead and jump right onto the computer and see what we captured over the last couple of nights when we did have some clear skies.
So now that we are on the computer, let's go ahead and see what our data looks like. This is the luminance data here from the RGB filter, the L Quad. Only about 1 hour because I was mostly focusing on the stars in itself because this is a pretty star field. But as I was noticing, there's actually a little bit of some reflection nebula that is associated with this target here. And when we're looking at the narrowband data from the hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3, you don't really notice that there whatsoever. But granted, this target is very rich in hydrogen gases, but we don't want to let this go to waste now, do we? Let's go ahead and add it to this as well. So we're not going to fully just take out the stars from our RGB image. We're going to actually incorporate that with kind of the same kind of techniques that I would normally use when extracting out the RGB channels for the narrowband data, so I can centralize my hydrogen, my oxygen, or if I was using my other filter too, sulfur as well. But I didn't capture sulfur with this target here for this one because I like it in just a regular HOO color palette. So let's first go ahead and do a little bit of some background extraction for our targets here. We're going to go ahead and remove the stars from both of them so we can do a little bit of some DBE. Okay, so we extracted our stars. We're just going to stick them off to the side here. I'm going to go ahead and start working with the narrowband data. I'm going to open up my dynamic background extraction. And the model parameters I like to use are 2 for tolerance, 8 for shadows, relaxation, with a smoothing factor of 0.8. And then what I'm going to do is go over towards the sample generation, and I like to use a default sample radius of about 98. And then I'm just going to go around the outside of the nebulosity. I'm trying not to include any of the nebulosity in itself because you don't want that into the extraction process too, because you want to preserve as much nebulosity as you possibly can. So definitely going to be focusing more on the corners. This is actually a pretty flat field across, thanks to a little bit of the calibration frames that I do with all my filters and some dark frames. So we're going to continue to go pretty much all the way around the outsides of the nebulosity in itself, just clicking some random points so we get a nice, good, even field of view. Any areas that are completely open on the sides, do a little bit closer towards the outside of the nebulosity in itself, and this looks pretty good right there. And then go over to the target correction, gonna select subtraction, gonna normalize, disregard background model, and replace target. Hit the check mark, let it do its thing, and that looks pretty good right there. We're also going to do the same thing over with the RGB data here, which you can see the gradient is a bit more because I was shooting just the RGB stars when the moon was about 70%. So we're going to go through the same thing as well. Same tolerance at 2. Shadow relaxation about 8 with a smoothing factor of 0.8. We're going to do 98 for the sample radius. And we can be a little bit more generous with the sample points here because we don't really have a whole lot of nebulosity since this is only in about an hour of data that was used for this. I kind of wish the moon wasn't too much of a factor because I would have actually liked to just done this as straight broadband because this would actually look pretty cool to really make that area of the reflection nebula near that bright flaming star that is associated with this to really start shining. So I'm going to go all the way around towards the outsides of the image. So we make sure we get all of our corners like we want. Right about there seems to look pretty good. Going to use the same target image correction of subtraction, normalize, disregard background model, and replace the target. And there we have it. Nice flat field now compared to what it was before and after. Looks pretty good. So we're going to add the stars back to these images here because the next step is some blur exterminator. Okay, so we added our stars back to our images. So we're going to open up the blur exterminator. And these are the settings I'd like to use. The stellar adjustments, the sharpening stars at 0.2. And I do an automatic PSF with non-stellar at about a 90. We're going to go ahead and run it on both of these here. So I'm going to first start it on the narrowband data in itself. This is more for a little bit of the non-stellar sharpening in itself, since we're not going to be using the narrowband stars in this image. There we go. Makes our stars nice and round compared to what it was before. And it actually shrinks them as well. So with the RGB image here, I'm going to run some spectrometric photo color calibration so I can get the nice correction color of the stars. And I'm going to go over and select the filter that I was using, the L-Quad Enhance, in all of the RGB channels. Gonna let that run. There we go, it's done its thing now. So we're gonna go ahead and split these channels up, but first I'm going to remove the stars from this image here, and we're gonna process those separately. But I am going to be extracting the RGB channels here because I want to incorporate this reflection nebula, which is located in the green and blue channels in here, and I want to add them to the green and blue channels here on my narrowband. So I'm going to go ahead and start to remove the stars here with Star Exterminator. Okay, now that we Got rid of the stars from our narrowband data. This is where the fun begins. We're going to go ahead and start extracting each of these channels, both in the RGB and the HA03, so we can combine that reflection nebula data to this image. So we're going to go over towards the RGB channel here for splitting this for the narrowband data. So here in the red channel should be our HA. So we're going to go ahead and be completely okay with stretching this. So I'm just going to use the Easy Processing Suite soft stretch here. And we got some beautiful data here on this target. I'm going to go ahead and just run it as the regular and just look at the absolute cliffs on this image here. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now, this is where things get interesting as we go over towards RGB. Do the same thing. I'm not going to use the red channel for the RGB channels because it's not really needed. We got enough hydrogen in the other one, but we are going to be combining both of the HA03 data, the green and blue, to the green and blue as well for the RGB. And this is just going to be very simple. We're just going to go right into PixelMath, and we're just going to add it just straight up. So we're going to first start it on the green channel, HA03 underscore G plus RGB underscore G. We're going to create a new image. And this should be our green channel here. So I'm going to go over to the Easy Processing Suite. Go over to Soft Stretch. And we're going to go ahead and run it. Cool. So there is our green channel there. So we're just going to call this O3G. Because in the end, we are going to be combining the other ones as well to LRG combination. And then we're going to do the same thing for the blue channel. Switch those over to blue. Stretch those out. Which I should probably mention with the O3G. We should not stretch that, as a matter of fact. I'm still going to name it as this. So my apologies for that. So now that we did the same thing for our blue channel, O3 blue. So now let's clean up our workspace by getting rid of all of these old windows because we're not going to need them anymore. And now we're going to go over to PixelMath yet again, but we are going to modify this current script. So for the blue channel, we're going to do the O3B. And for the green channel, O3G. We're going to create a new image. And then now we're going to go over towards the Easy Processing Suite and do a soft stretch. Go ahead and run that. And there we go. We have now combined our RGB data channels to include the reflection nebula and added the O3 together. So, perfect. And then we're just going to rename this as O3. So there we go. We got our hydrogen. We got our oxygen data. Let's go over towards LRGB combination. Luminous channel, we're going to use HA. Red channel, HA as well. Green, we'll include the O3 and the O3. Apply global. And there we have it. Now we've included a little bit of data that is a reflection nebula, which will show up quite nicely in the end. It is a little bit pinkish, but we're going to play with the colors with this here in the end. So we're going to go ahead and just get rid of all of these unnecessary windows, because it is cramping up our workspace here. Alrighty. We're going to do a little bit of some noise reduction here with Noise Exterminator. Going to just run it as the defaults. There we go. Gorgeous. We're going to do a little bit of some sharpening too, which I have found when actually using Blur Exterminator. If you turn the stellar adjustments, the sharpening stars, down like all the way to like 0, uncheck the automatic PSF, and you kind of just play with this here, the slider for your PSF. So if you can remember what your star sizes was normally when you were imaging for that night, which mine were about sitting near 3 because of this time of year with all of the bad seeing and strong turbulence above with the jet stream roaring over. I'm going to go ahead and use that as our sharpening. I'd like to put this down at about 50, like 0.5. And you're going to notice a big difference when you're looking at the stellar sharpening, which I've actually have talked to a couple people about using this kind of method, and they actually really like it too. And I know a couple that use this as well. So Blur Exterminator is a wonderful tool, not only for, doing deconvolution, but also helping with your sharpening. And look at that. Look how much of a difference that is. Nothing's blown out whatsoever. Everything's all nice, sharp, and crisp. So now we get to start playing with a little bit of some colors. So what I like to use is actually a wonderful tool inside of the PixInsight toolbox, which you go down there to the toolbox and selective color correction. This is really nice too because it allows you to be able to make color mask right inside of this utility here. So like it automatically starts to default to the red. If you show the mask, there's a red. Perfect, right? And then you can start, adding, some enhancements to the colors. Like I want to try and make this a little bit more on the red side. I'm going to continue to keep playing with these sliders here, like increasing the saturation. So we're going to try and make this a nice, like, fiery red if we can. And the nice part is, too, you can actually zoom in on the image. So you just got to keep playing with these channels in general, just to kind of get it to the color that you want. Okay, so I like it where we have it now. Let's go ahead and start working on the stars itself. So an easy way to kind of stretch your stars, make sure you have this repository from SETI Astro, is star stretch. Very easy. You can also show a preview window of what your stars look like. You can kind of move around. See, it's not, super strong with this. I just like to use just the regular default. It does pretty darn well, which you can, stretch the amount even more if you want to. Especially if you want to be able to show a lot more of the star color, just to kind of make it shine. You can also fit it to the preview window. You can also do a little bit of a color boost. You can remove the green. all in one fellow swoop. Which I kind of keep it near the defaults. But like right there, that looks very good. So we're going to go ahead and execute that. But I also want to make sure that in the invert that we don't have green, which we do. So we're just going to do another SCNR, but on the invert side of things, because green stars don't exist. There we go. And then I'd just like to make a star mask. So I can just add a little bit more of some custom saturation to my stars in itself. You can either do it as like, the saturation of that, or you can just go over and just crank up the saturation so you're not missing anything. So we're going to zoom into some of these brighter stars here. And there we go. We got nice, colorful, saturated stars. Now we get to see what the final images look like, at least from PixInsight, because afterwards I like to go into Photoshop just to do some final last-minute touches to this. So we're going to go ahead and combine our stars and starless. Do have some pixel math for that too. So it rescreens the stars back together. And there we have it. Beautiful, beautiful image. We're going to full screen this. And look at this wonderful Flaming Star Nebula with some beautiful color stars. So we're going to call that good for at least the PixInsight aspect. And then we're going to switch over to Photoshop now. Now inside of Photoshop, I just like to use one single tool. And that is under filters, camera raw filter. This is great because you can do a lot of like simple contrasting. You could do some nice clarity to kind of clean things up here. And this is where you just kind of have your creative freedom here. So I'm going to be messing with a little bit of like the blacks. Clarity is a really nice one because you can really start sharpening up the overall details, and this just looks absolutely amazing. You can turn out the vibrance a little bit for some of the areas. You can add a little bit more saturation if you want. You can also increase the darks or make it a little darker. Mess with the shadows. So I'm going to tone them down a little bit. Work with a bit of the highlights. You can either remove some highlights or increase some highlights. I like to do some slight reduction in highlights. You can go over here, do some sharpening. You can also do some very subtle like noise reduction, like luminance contrast. You can do some slight noise reduction on this area, which all that's looking pretty good. Do a little bit of some saturation, either in hues or on the luminance. I just want to add a little bit more red to this because this is a nice red target. You can add a little bit of blue too, so you can make the stars shine. And that looks pretty solid right there. So there we go. This is our final product. Very, very satisfied with this. And yeah, we're going to call this a day here. So thank you for watching as always. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. I love doing videos like this. And if you happen to be, in the market for any other equipment, I do have affiliate links down in the description below. You need some astrophotography accessories for the sea stars or some cable management solutions. I do run a shop on Etsy called Outtenastrophotography. and I would love to be able to have your business. So thank you as always. Clear skies, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.